around, heroes, and join me for an in-depth look into the secrets of Demeo.
Re-upped with corrections, updates, and more YouTube ads for 2024.
In this episode, we break down the fourth wall to see how things work.
Oh, hello.
Let me first just cover the term Fog of War. That's any dark area on the board where no character can see. It's where monster spawns occur, and some monsters will intentionally flee into the Fog of War. Whenever the game decides you need more monsters, they will be spawned somewhere in the Fog of War, around 6 to 12 spaces away from where the character stops.
They're everywhere! They're everywhere!
That stopping point is tied to the space where the spawn could occur, and stopping on the same space will yield similar results. Here, I'm following exactly the same path, and able to predict where the spawns are going to occur. I'm not suggesting you do this, I'm just illustrating the point. 2 big moves could have 2 spawns. It's best to make your big move with your first action point, but be cautious with your second action point. If they spawn 9 spaces away, and you move a full 4 spaces towards them, you're in their attack range. New monsters can also spawn whenever you reveal a space covered by the Fog of War during movement. Opening doors, walking upstairs, teleporting, and dropping a scrying beacon are big ones, but pretty much any movement reveals some new spaces. Sometimes you delve too hastily, and suddenly you're trapped by the armies of Mordor.
It will target you if it can see you, or if it can reach you in one turn.
If you immediately leave and get out of melee range, you can eliminate a lot of their options. They might move towards you, or they might just start wandering on patrol, or peek out only to return to the Fog of War where it's safe.
Most monsters assess their targets each action, so 2 or 3 times. You'll sometimes see monsters go after one target, then change their minds and go after a different one. Some monsters can lock onto one target without reassessing, so you'll see them walking right on by.
If you don't move, or skip your turn, no monster spawns can occur. So use the skip function instead of moving back and forth, unless you're looking for some action. You're all familiar with the rangefinder. When it's your turn, you can see where your character can move, and with what they can interact. This has some useful applications to let you see the unseen. First, we have the aforementioned Fog of War. Every space within your movement range, typically 4 spaces, should be a space you can move to. If you can't, there's either something there, or there's something blocking you from getting there. Friendlies allow you to pass through them. Lamps and enemies do not. Most unseen things cannot be interacted with, the exception being points of interest. Chests, healing fountains, and the exit, if you have a key, can be blindly operated.
Fun fact, if you haven't revealed the exit yet, it can be blindly operated, even if there are monsters nearby. The exit can only be blocked by monsters if it's already revealed. It's gotta be a speedrunning trick, right?
And if a POI doesn't let you interact, it's the exit and you don't have the key. Even if it looks like there's nothing to impede you, it's worth scanning unseen places by hovering over them with your piece. If you see a red X, that's also something, or it's a space that you can no longer reach because of something.
What we propose to do is to change something into nothing and back again.
There's no difference between a red X and a space outside your rangefinder. It's harder to deal with red X's, since you have to remember where they are. You can recalculate your rangefinder by grabbing a card in your hand, and then releasing it without playing it. Now the spaces you can't move to are obvious. Second, we have the darkness in Book 2, Realm of the Rat King. Like the Fog of War, we can't see what's in the space, but we know we can't travel there. Unlike the Fog of War, nothing can spawn here. Since it's in line of sight, you can use your ranged attacks to scan the area for targets, though you won't be able to differentiate between enemies and lamps or spore fungus. Melee attackers are hit hard by the darkness, so be sure to give them the torch status so that they can act normally. Finally, we have the invisibility in Book 4, Curse of the Serpent Lord. Any anomalies with your rangefinder on level 3 can usually be attributed to the invisible boss's presence. This includes spaces that don't want to let you attack from, spaces you can't move to in the Fog of War where you know there isn't anything, tight corridors that limit your movement, and a single space that seems to extend your range.
This last one has been patched out of the game. Pity.
You can only see your movement rangefinder on your turn, but you can see all your cards' rangefinders at any time. This helps you plan your move before it's your turn. It's always an option for class cards and universal cards in your hand, but you can only check the range of replenishing cards if they weren't used in the previous turn.
It's my time.
What these card ranges are revealing is your character's line of sight combined with the card's range limit. The Barbarian's grappling hook is not like other cards in the game, and it gives the player feedback on the targeted space that can be very useful with darkness and invisibility. An empty space or coin pile is indicated by an arrow to the targeted space, a heavy enemy by an arrow near the targeted space, a light enemy by an arrow pointing near the Barbarian, and a lamp by an arrow directly to the Barbarian, assuming he doesn't already have a lamp ready to launch. There are some configurations you probably already recognize where you can't assume you have line of sight. Moving like a knight in chess around a wall is a common one, and you've got a 50-50 chance of being able to target that space. If you can see a monster in this space, it can also see you. It's also dangerous to assume that you'll have line of sight on stairs. There's something messed up with stairs that makes them unpredictable. Unless you are interacting with something that forces your character to face a particular direction, you can turn them to face any direction as part of a move action. That's more important in Demeo battles, but just because they're on your side here doesn't mean they still can't backstab you by accident. Enemy positioning is more important. It affects backstab bonus, Scorpion blocking at the front, and Hydra counterattack damage at the back. If the enemy has melee attacked or moved, it will be facing one of the 8 major directions. It will have 3 front spaces, 2 sides, and 3 backs. If it's newly spawned or has used a ranged attack, it will often have 4 front spaces, no sides, and 4 backs. Attack cancelling is always an option when it's time to roll the die. Be cautious when you're moving off a space with an environmental effect to attack. If you cancel, you will get a free move back to that space and the environmental effect will trigger. This most commonly occurs in poison clouds, since they don't dissipate. There are a few exploits that can make the game easier if you don't mind playing a little dirty. After all, it's only the monsters suffering. If you do mind, skip ahead about 2 minutes.
Technically, he hadn't even cheated, and he got to enjoy his big payday.
Let's start light. You can use a water lamp to blast your enemies to different levels. This won't take them through walls, but any flat barrier where the red X is on the same level as an adjacent floor space could allow things to be pushed past it. This includes charge and feral charge. Sigrun and Kana can leap right over pits. Water propulsion lets you move through diagonal spaces that would not normally allow movement. Sometimes the alternative is worse. When a monster is visible, but you know it's not going to stay visible, you can use the game's unofficial tracking method to keep tabs on it. Look for monsters with a high flight risk. For example, goblins shaking at the sight of a friend dying, thieves picking pockets, and elven summoners about to teleport away. All you need to do is pick them up, wait for them to finish their move, they finish when their ghost likeness shrinks into the ground, and then let go. A darker version of them will remain visible to you alone, not the other players. You won't see hit points, stats, or status effects, though visible effects like Deflect Barrier will still be shown. Leaving the game while you're in possession of the key will move the key to another random player, or it might just go to the host. I haven't fully tested it. You can rejoin the game and continue like nothing happened, assuming you remember the room number. During friendlies and monster movement, you can learn more about what's hunting you. Where are your friendlies going? And what are your emplacements shooting at? They can see things you can't, and you can learn by their actions. When a monster takes damage, you'll see where it is. And with practice, you'll be able to tell what it is by its scream. When a monster moves as a result of being panicked upon witnessing the death of an ally, it becomes momentarily visible as it flees. If you're fast enough to grab it, you can use the game's unofficial monster tracking. When it deals damage, you'll also get a unique battle cry, and the amount of damage gives you another clue. Less unique to the monster is the sound of movement, but it still gives you an idea of how many enemies there are and roughly where they are, and poison makes it super obvious. Doors opening give away position, but not numbers. Some enemies, like hounds and rats, can't open doors, and some just wait creepily for you to open it for them.
Listen to this.
Monster speed is important to note.
I'll skewer you.
Movement times AP gives you its maximum distance in one turn. And remember to add their attack range when calculating where they threaten. Even if two monsters cover the same distance, such as rats and elven hounds, you should note the differences. The monster with 3 AP will be observant and reactive, calculating what it does 3 times per turn. They can also take up to 4 damage when moving through poison. In contrast, the monster with 2 AP will be rushed and absent-minded. It's much more common for a rat to run past you than a hound. These take up to 3 damage moving through poison. Monsters with 1 action point, and that's really just the Elven Summoner, will appear bumbling and aloof. On the other hand, high movement allows easier travel through cramped dungeons. Whereas the Elven Hound is more reactive, the rat is more nimble. Monsters with a movement of 3 or more are difficult to block, but the Tangle status is very effective. Monsters with a normal movement of 2 are often slowed down by other monsters or piles of gold. They are more likely to lose distance vaulting an obstacle. Monsters with a movement of 1, due to weakness, tangled, or being a silent sentinel, can't step over any obstacle, even another enemy. And regardless of movement score, enemies cannot cross over friendlies or lamps.
I'm ready.
Diagonals are worth mentioning.
Diagonally.
Enemies will attack diagonally, yes, but only if they can reach the target somehow. Since they can't move diagonally through impassable objects, and if no other way is available, they will not be able to melee attack. Here, Kana is open at the back, so she can be targeted and attack diagonally. All I have to do is cover Kana's back so the 4 adjacent spaces on the straight are occupied by Oana, 2 walls, and a Leviathan to make her a non-target.
Monster time.
If the target they want is completely inaccessible, it will throw the enemy into confusion and they will start wandering around. This only works when the unreachable target is a higher priority, such as a lure surrounded by 4 heroes, or a hero surrounded by lamps.
Here you can see lamps in use. These make it impossible for monsters to find a path to your hero, and if it can't find a path to your exact space, it can't target you at all. It's like you're invisible, and if you're not a target, a ranged enemy won't bother shooting the lamps surrounding you either. This works both ways with a lure. You can surround the lure with heroes and emplacements, or you can surround an enemy like the Rat King. As long as the enemy can see the lure, but not reach it, it will do nothing. It makes adamant potions almost unnecessary.
Monsters that have been allowed to live go early on. Beware old elven mystics, who are very likely to teleport a monster that hasn't acted yet in your face. Finally, a note that monsters are unaffected by altitude. Although heroes cannot attack a higher floor unless either the attacker or the target is on the stairs, this doesn't apply to monsters. That means you need to take the higher ground, just not to suffer a disadvantage. Each monster has a list of behaviors. During its turn, it flips through them until it finds a viable option. When they don't find an option, they end up motionless for the turn. By removing options, you force certain behavior, which makes the monsters easier to read. Even if they have ranged and special attacks, enemies can be boxed in and completely nullified. For this, you'll want steadfast allies, elementals, and spiders. Eventually, you'll get a kill on even the biggest of foes. If you can panic them into an alcove, they can be blocked by a single friendly or lamp.
One small step. It's a long journey.
It needs to block in all 4 directions. Diagonal doesn't count.
Listen to this.
Alright.
Attack behaviors include regular move and attack, the hit and run used by rats, hounds, and thieves, moving to the correct range for a spearing attack, and moving to the minimum range for a ranged attack. To see if your enemy has a melee attack, pick it up and look for the ability Melee Attack, Knockback, Poisonous Bite, or Steal. A special note about Reptilian Mage, Root Beast, and Elven Spearman. Although the stats show that they have a melee attack, they really don't, and rely on special abilities and spear thrusts. Ranged attackers without melee attacks can be intimidated into not attacking by crowding them so they cannot reach their minimum range to attack, usually 3 spaces. To see if your enemy has a ranged attack, look for anything with arrow, barrage, spear, or javelin. This doesn't apply to a turret's crossbow bolt, which doesn't have a minimum range. Confusing a monster with no melee attack will leave them stunned. They won't shoot randomly.
Bow ready.
Ranged attackers will also target lamps within 2 spaces of a viable target. If it's a gas lamp and you aren't right next to it, or you are right next to it but a heavy arrow pushes it out of the way, you can get them to waste a shot. Movement behaviors include following a target, swarming around or guarding an area, and patrolling. Following gives monsters X-ray vision, so just moving around a corner might not be good enough.
And you thought you were being all sneaky.
Try to make sure you're out of their threat range. All you have to do is move so an enemy is out of range and out of sight for a chance of changing its behavior. Scab rats could suddenly wander off on patrol. Normal rats might stick their heads out and then flee back into the shadows. Defensive behaviors include drinking healing potions, healing other enemies, fleeing and healing, and just fleeing, which isn't the same as panic. Try not to be in a position where they can pop out and hit you again. Either pursue or drop back so they expose themselves. Healing enemies are super annoying, so if possible, don't waste attacks on enemies with healing potions unless you can kill them in one turn. The exception is the Root Beast, which you can hit once and send running off to heal, buying you some time to deal with other enemies.
Eat it.
Special abilities come in all shapes and sizes, and some are hard to tell from ranged attacks. Generally, if it has a cooldown period, it's considered a special ability and is subject to the Bard's Hymn of Disruption. And add Petrification to this list. For quite a few monsters, blocking their abilities will have them resorting to melee attacks. If they don't have melee attacks, they just walk up to you and pose. Draining Kiss often targets player 1, no matter where they are or even if they're stealth.
My hunter's usually player 1, and I haven't noticed this in a long while, so I think this is fixed now.
Anything that reduces damage from leeching, like Courage Shanty, Magic Shield, and Howl of the Ancients, will also reduce the healing that is imparted onto an injured enemy. Charm works well here, and if the priest drains a marked enemy, it will deal 5 damage and heal an ally for 5. Astral Barrier will cause something else to be drained, possibly even a lamp. Puddle Teleportation lets a Brookmare appear wherever there is a water puddle, with no cooldown. The monster can create puddles with Mythical Wave and travel to those, but otherwise you can preemptively remove them by moving onto them, or just don't stop next to one. Mythical Wave is used by Brookmares, and Shockwave by Reptilian Brutes. One produces water, the other corruption. My assassin here has a movement of 4, but I'm confident I can smack that backside safely. The Brookmare could just walk up and bite me, but it hasn't used any of its special abilities, which it prefers. I'm not adjacent to any wet spots, and I'm the closest target in line of sight, so it'll use Mythical Wave. It doesn't care that the wave can't go downhill. This leaves me free to attack and stealth, and the cycle continues. I'll mention Berserk here. Although it isn't a behavior, it's a status. Berserk monsters get +1 damage, double movement, and 1 attack per action point. Basically, it makes them like player characters. Is taunt a status or a behavior? I've never been able to get taunt to work with the bone.
Yes, sir. No more taunting with a bone.
But taunting a scorpion is always super effective, because when you taunt one, you taunt them all. There are 3 ways to earn mana in the game: attacking enemies, environmental kills, and recycling cards. We're going to talk about the 4-player game here. For 3 players, add 20%. 2 players add 30%, and 1 player add 180%. Slapping things around is the slowest way to earn, yielding 2.5% per hit, regardless of the damage. A weakened strike for 0 damage gets the same mana as a kill shot on a cave troll. This is awarded for monsters, lamps, sand piles, pretty much anything you can attack. Then there are environmental kills. When a monster that spawns normally in the Fog of War dies, it yields a 16% mana boost. That's 45% in a single-player game. And it's very easy to get with the low monster hit points, so make sure to spill poison, summon friendlies, and pop lamps. Not necessarily in that order. Summoned enemies, like rats from nests, spiders from eggs, and cultists from priests, are considered part of the source, and don't give any mana when killed this way. This doesn't include monsters summoned by rifts. Finally, you can recycle cards for mana. The boost is between 10 and 20%, except for the Jeweled Scarab at 30%. Some cards can yield more mana played rather than burned, with the added benefit of removing monsters. The Bard summons a Hurricane.
There's another one! There's one to our right!
Enhances other friendlies and emplacements. The Barbarian launches poison lamps in his wake and sets up chain reactions with other lamps. Leviathan gets some kills too. The Hunter has a beast army, including Beast Whisperer, Called Companion, and Charm. The Guardian sets up absolute mana factories with the Behemoths and Healing Wards. The Warlock uses her Astacat for frequent environmental kills. The Assassin rakes in kills with Poison Bomb and Booby Trap. The Sorcerer uses Vortex in heavily populated areas to print his own mana. For all heroes, the Repeating Ballista is a good source of kills, but it's easily destroyed without protection. Bone and Wooden Bone are nearly as good when used to tame a hound. Thanks for checking out another masterclass. If you learned anything, I believe the like button is in your range if you're not tangled. Keep an eye out for the next boss battle video, where we take all the cards and mechanics we've learned up to this point and apply them to the toughest battles in the game. This has been my Why.
And this has been Jolin14.
See you in Helmar.